feeling that the cemetery had marked him, that had called him back. Hi, I'm Max, and this is Echoes in the Dark. And tonight, we're telling the story of a place where the forgotten never rest, where the dead whisper to those who dare to listen. The Cemetery of Forgotten Souls. Chapter 2. The Encounter with the Lost Child. The night returned faster than Daniel expected. He had barely slept, haunted by the images and whispers from his first visit. The notebook lay open on his desk, scribbled with frantic observations, names, descriptions, and sketches of shadows that seemed impossibly alive. Yet, even with the daylight hours that followed, he couldn't shake the feeling that the cemetery had marked him, that it had called him back. As dusk fell, Daniel found himself retracing his steps along the narrow path to the wrought iron gates. The town was quiet, the streets nearly deserted, but he felt a prickle along the back of his neck, as though unseen eyes were following him. By the time he reached the cemetery, the mist had already begun to curl along the stone paths. The air felt heavier than the night before, almost thick enough to taste. Daniel clicked on his flashlight, the beams slicing through the gray haze, illuminating gravestones that seemed taller and more menacing than daylight had allowed. His heart raced, and the first whisper reached him almost immediately, a soft, melodic voice that seemed to drift directly into his mind. "Follow me, please." He froze. The voice was small, childlike, and desperate. His eyes darted around, and then he saw her, a small girl, no more than 7, standing among the gravestones. She wore a faded dress that fluttered in the wind, her bare feet brushing against the damp earth. Her eyes, pale and hollow, were impossibly large, fixed on him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "Hello," Daniel whispered, unsure whether the girl would even hear him. She tilted her head, and the faintest quiver of a smile touched her lips. Then she began walking slowly, glancing back over her shoulder as if inviting him to follow. Against every instinct screaming at him to flee, Daniel stepped after her. The mist thickened, curling around him, and the gravestones seemed to shift, rearranging themselves into new paths he had never seen before. The girl paused at the edge of a particularly old section of the cemetery, graves unmarked, barely disturbed, yet somehow radiating a weight of tragedy. "This way," the girl whispered. Daniel approached cautiously. The air was freezing now, and he felt fingers of wind brush against his skin like icy hands. The girl knelt by a small, unmarked grave. As Daniel leaned closer, he realized the soil had been freshly turned, and there were faint imprints of tiny footprints leading away from the grave, footprints that faded into the mist. "Who are you?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling. The girl's gaze met his, wide and sorrowful. She did not answer with words, but he understood. She had been forgotten, buried without ceremony, without acknowledgement, and her soul had lingered, tethered to the earth, hoping someone would remember her. Suddenly, the whispers erupted around him, a cacophony of hundreds of voices overlapping. "Remember us. See us. Don't leave us." Shadows twisted along the gravestones, more distinct now, forming the shapes of men, women, and children. They all stared at Daniel with pleading eyes, each silently demanding recognition. The little girl's gaze pierced him, and he felt the weight of every forgotten soul pressing in from every direction. He fumbled with his notebook, trying to write down names, descriptions, and impressions, but the hands of the shadows reached for him, not violently, but insistently, guiding, urging him to see, to remember. A chill ran down his spine as he realized these weren't just memories. These were lives demanding acknowledgement, and they would not wait silently for long. The girl suddenly stood and stepped closer, taking his hand. Her touch was cold, but not cruel. She guided him further into the unmarked graves, deeper than he had ever ventured before. Shadows thickened around them, some whispering names, some crying, some laughing softly. The cemetery was alive now, its heart beating in time with the ghost's restless energy. Daniel felt dizzy, disoriented, but he followed. He realized that if he did not keep moving, if he did not acknowledge each presence, he might become trapped here too, pulled into the liminal space between life and death. Finally, The girl stopped at a gravestone that seemed older than the rest, worn nearly flat with age. She looked up at Daniel, her eyes imploring, and for the first time, he spoke aloud, reading the inscription. Here lies little Eleanor Whitlock, taken too soon in the winter of 1827. May she rest at last. A hush fell over the cemetery. The whispers faded, the shadows recoiled, and the mist began to thin. The little girl smiled, faintly this time, and faded into the air like morning fog. The weight pressing on Daniel's chest lifted, but he knew it was only temporary. As dawn broke, the cemetery returned to its silence. Yet Daniel knew the encounter had changed him. He had seen the forgotten. He had acknowledged them. But he also knew the cemetery's call would come again. And next time, it would demand even more. Max speaking from echoes in the dark. Stay curious, stay cautious, and stay tuned for the next chapter.